just want to start by saying thank you all for coming. I've met a few of you already last night, and obviously as far back as Bernie AOC when this whole adventure started. And that was where I met Trish for the first time. So I think most of you know her. If you don't, talk about a passionate woman that's very driven. I've learned a lot about myself already, and obviously your community from the passion of Trish. And I just want to say thank you to your family. I know that all of you guys are making a big investment in me, and I'll do my best not to let you down. So I just want to talk a little bit about who I am, and my hope tonight is really just to show you what this is all about, to talk about what the reasons I decided to run, and hopefully they mean as much to you as they do to me. I'm a Montanan. I grew up in Montana. I grew up in the Bitterroot Valley, just south of Missoula. I know it's not Bozeman. I'm over there in Grizz country, but I still love you guys. But I was telling a story earlier. Part of what forged who I am was that upbringing in, small town in Montana. And one of my first jobs was changing pipe. And I think you have to be a little bit of a country boy to understand what changing pipe is. But you're talking 3 cents per pipe, walking through the fields of Montana, moving irrigation pipe. It takes a long time to make $10. And one of the things that I look back on is what I hated that, right? As a kid, I was like, this is awful. There's got to be a better job. And there was, but the values that it instilled to me as a kid, work ethic, and just appreciation for what was coming from that, whether it was crops or agriculture. At that time, now I look back as a dad and I realized we were feeding our family. And you start to just look at things with a little bit different perspective. So I grew up there. I left Stevensville after high school. I went to Montana Tech. I was a Butte guy for a couple of years. That was an interesting experience. Any of you that know Butte. Spent time in Bozeman during those years, obviously, coming over to Cat games and having a great time. But a couple years in, I was studying engineering. Lost a really close family friend of mine in Iraq. He was in EOD. Those who don't know what that is, explosive ordnance disposal. And he passed away, and it kind of changed my perspective on what am I doing. And I come from a family that served in the Navy and Army, and so I had that little bit of an inner feeling of like, it's time to go, see and do more for your country. And so I left a 4-Ed scholarship at Montana Tech. I was playing football there, studying engineering, and decided to join the Navy, enlisted, not even as an officer, and shipped out, and that was when I left Montana. It took me till 4 years ago to get back. So when they say, it's hard to get back to Montana when you leave, it is really true. But the experiences I had in that almost 20 years are, I think, part of the value that I bring back to Montana now. And so I'd like to tell you a little bit about those, and I think that'll lead me to my why on why I'm doing this. One of the big experiences for me, my 3rd year in the Navy, I had a pretty significant injury, broke my back in 3 places. And that was kind of my first immersion into what healthcare looks like for veterans. And we've seen an attack on the VA in the last 4 months, a pretty scary one. And for me, that was life-changing, to the point where when I got out of the Navy, I went into healthcare. My undergrad's in nutrition, and I practiced health and wellness for almost 5 years. I was a master fitness trainer. And my first philanthropic work was a organization I started called Pedal for Prevention. Growing up, my parents did foster care, so we had a lot of kids coming through the house, and one young man we ended up adopting became my younger brother. But he struggled with obesity growing up. And so I was really passionate about trying to find different ways to fight childhood obesity. And so that organization, Pedal for Prevention, the goal was to help fund research that was geared towards reducing childhood obesity. So I rode across country in 2012. That was my first fundraising efforts. I was just talking to Tricia earlier about how I'm not a fundraiser by nature, but I guess I have done some fundraising. Pedal for Prevention, the goal was to raise money for the Lions for a Healthier Generation, who at that time was part of an offshoot of the Clinton Foundation. And their goal was to get healthy food programs back into schools. And that's another big topic we're seeing right now, right? Cuts to SNAP and cuts to education and food in the school systems. A lot of these kids, and you'll hear more about how I know this in a minute, but a lot of these kids now, if they don't eat inside the school system, they don't eat. Meaning they don't get breakfast, they don't get lunch, and many times they're taking food home in aftercare programs and things like that are what they have for dinner as well. So I ended up riding coast to coast, and that was kind of my first campaign, so to speak, was getting to just talk to towns along the way about what they're doing for their youth in terms of prevention. And it was really life-changing to the point where I was like, I love this. I want to stay in this industry. Decided to go to Seattle University and study my master's, and I ended up studying an MBA of sport. And so my focus was really to take this to the next level. Excuse me. And through that process, made a lot of great connections in the recreation industry. And so I sidestepped and did a stint in Oregon for a while with Sunset Empire Parks and Rec, who was also doing some great things in their community. Through that process, finishing up my education at Seattle University, was recruited to join, of all things, U.S. Bank, which is, I know you're like, what? In Denver. But what they were doing was pretty cool. It was recruiting leaders, people with leadership history and backgrounds, to come into communities and teach them the banking part. Because as we all remember, banks back in the day, they were the center of communities, and the whole point was to fund and finance small business, home ownership, things that were critical to developing our society, not be billion, trillion-dollar organizations that are focused solely on making money. And so I accepted the invitation to join this leadership program and uprooted my whole family. We moved to Denver, and through that process really became immersed in small business. And so small business, we considered anything under $2.5 million a year. So any businesses that were making that kind of quantified that piece. So you're talking sign companies, cabinet builders, that sort of thing. And one of the ones I fell in love with was a childcare company. Owner then was closing its doors and became good friends with their COO. And I said, hey, I think we should take a swing at this. Colorado, much like Montana, was experiencing some shortages on child care providers. And we've heard that in the state legislative level lately. So we decided to take a stab at that, and in 10 years became their largest provider. So opened our doors in 2016 with 2 locations. By last year, in 2024, we had 42 locations, and we're serving 9,000 kids. That journey through that process taught me a lot about the impact of childcare, not only in communities, but on local economies as well. And especially through COVID, if you think about like kids not in a school system, people still have to work, especially essential workers. And so I just look at the opportunities that life has given me, these different industries. And fast forward to October, we decided to sell. November, we all know what happened in November, right? The election happened, for those that don't know what happened in November. Not a great one. But, you know, it was an eye-opener for me, because January, February rolled around, one of the first attacks was on cancer research. And of those that have read my profile know my oldest daughter passed from leukemia at the age of 13. So back in 2020, we were dealing with running this business through times of COVID. Our oldest daughter was diagnosed with leukemia, and our first bill that we received. Would you mind grabbing my glasses? Our first bill that we received was for $330,000 for the first month of care. And we had the best insurance you could get as a small business, right? Paying the top premium. So Children's Hospital stepped in, thank God, and said, we got you guys, right? Don't worry about it. But it also opened my eyes a little bit to be like, what if that happens to someone that's not a kid and they don't qualify for children's? Or what if that happens to someone who doesn't have insurance, right? And so I think we all have to question, and I think most of us here already do, that's why we're here. But it's all about storytelling and how this can affect us. And so part of my why, the big starting point of this journey was when they cut those cancer research. Some of those people impacted by those cuts were people that we were going through programs with in Children's Hospital. So you're talking about kids who participated in studies when they were, diagnosed themselves. Some of them have since passed, my daughter included. Others are still going through that. Maybe they're in remission, or maybe they've gone back into treatment. And so it's not just kids. I mean, you're talking adults, women with breast cancer, you name it, right? There's so much research that's valuable to the future of our medical community that is just being disregarded. And so that's one area I'm super passionate about. I think we have to do better at. We talked a little bit about mental health with Michelle and how that is impacted. That's part of that community as well. And I think we just owe it to ourselves as a nation to do better in that area. And so that was the first strike for me. The second, not even, I think 3 days later, was the cuts to the Department of Education. I told you a little bit about my company. We primarily did school age before and after care. But you think about an aftercare environment, school age kids, my daughter's here, say hi, Maya.
She's like, don't do that to her.
Told you I was going to call you out. But you think about, 5th, 6th grade and younger, those couple of hours before and after school equate to roughly an extra 120 days of school a year. And so there's an opportunity there to close not only this COVID learning loss gap that we're seeing in kids, but also just to provide a safe space for a lot of kids to go that they don't necessarily have when they're at home. And I'm not just talking inner city kids. I'm talking small town, a lot of the communities we see here in Montana, giving them an opportunity not only to have a better education, but a safe place to go where maybe they're also getting fed. So that was another big piece for me. When I saw that cuts to the Department of Education, and trust me, I'm the first one to tell you that I think our education system is in need of serious reform. Our teachers are way underpaid, and I think if one benefit we could potentially see out of this is, it's not if, but when the Department of Education is rebuilt, maybe we could do it in a way that's applicable to 2020 something and not 1940, right? But that being said, we can't go to a private voucher system where we're resegregating schools again. It's hugely devastating to some of these communities. So that was my big second piece. You heard my story about being a veteran. 80,000 jobs were cut to the VA. We're still seeing more of that coming down. I have good friends of mine that I served with that were veterans and now work for the VA, and they're direct from their mouth is, hey, we're looking at what was a 2-month backlog on processing veteran files is now 2 years with these cuts. So when you're looking at a veteran like me, or someone maybe that was in combat and you're talking about a PTSD type situation, that 2 years is the difference between life and death. And that we can't be okay with that as a nation or a community. Those are people that, put their personal interests on the line, on pause, and said, hey, I'm going to dedicate my well-being to the betterment of this country in hopes that we would take care of them on the back end. And we're not doing that. We're dropping the ball. So I think we really have to have people in Congress and Senate that still focus on those core components. The last one I know a lot of us are passionate about, fourth and fifth one, are ones that are big hits on this current bill, which are Medicaid, Medicare. And the big thing that we're looking at losing here in Montana is as many as 48 rural hospitals will close with this potentially $880 billion cut. So you look at a community like mine. I'm from St. Regis, Montana. I live there now. God forbid, say my dad has a heart attack, right? Right now it's a 10-minute drive to the local hospital. With Superior Hospital closing, that would be an hour-and-a-half drive to Missoula. Again, life and death, right? In those type of situations, car wrecks, you name it. So Montana's a big state. We know that. We know how far it is between communities. Those rural clinics and hospitals are critical to who we are as a community. So we've got a lot of work to do. And so I'm here tonight to tell you that I'm not a politician. Most of you have asked me bits and pieces about my why. I am a dad, a proud dad of 7 kids. I know that's a lot of kids. One of them's here with me tonight. I'm a proud husband. I am a veteran, like I said. I'm a former businessman and entrepreneur. More importantly, I'm a Montanan, just like you. And I don't think we're getting the representation that we deserve as a people. I don't think we're getting the opportunity to be heard as people. And I think we need someone, not just me, but many of us, that are going to say, hey, we can do better, and actually fight for things that are going to improve our society. So a big part of my why is just that. Not politics, but problem solving. And we have a lot of problems that need solved. And I can't solve them by myself. Many of you come from different backgrounds and industries, and you have your own traumas, I'm sure. Some of you may be experiencing them right now, and I'm sorry for that. I've heard a few stories tonight that are devastating, and I appreciate that you're willing to share those with me. I would never want anyone to experience what it's like to lose your oldest daughter. That's horrible. I would never want anyone to experience what it's like to lose your best friend in military service. That's horrible. So I think just bringing the temperature down and saying, hey, we have an opportunity to get back to the basics here and build community. That's what I think we can do. And so what it takes all of you to do is to extend your hand across the aisle and say, hey, I may not agree with some of the decisions that are going on, but what we heard last night, that's already happening at our state legislative level, right? We have a lot of core Republicans that reached across the aisle and worked with our Democratic state legislators to get really great things done for us at the state level. I think we have to do that at the community level too, and say, hey, we have an opportunity here to be Montanans again and not us versus them. I'm willing to do that. That's what I'm running my whole campaign on, is to say, hey, this idea of the man in black, those of you that have read that piece, is like, I'm not going to wear a red tie and I'm not going to wear a blue tie. I wear a black tie for that exact reason. I'm tired of extremism and polarity. It's tearing us apart. I remember the days in Montana where my one neighbor was a Democrat, one was a Republican, and another one might have been Green Party or whatever, and nobody cared. We'd all drop everything to help each other out, right? I think that core is still there in many of us, and I think we can get back to that. So I'm here tonight as long as you guys want to, as long as you will let me stay.
I might be upstairs sleeping.
That's fine. She doesn't sleep. Don't let her fool
You
you.
guys can stay until this here.
But I'm here all night if you want to know more about me or my story, or if you want to talk about specific issues that are important to you. That's what I'm here for tonight. I'm trying to build an army, and what I mean by that is not, gun wielding, pitchfork wielding people marching down the streets, but instead real Americans, real Montanans that are willing to say, hey, I'm going to find other people and tell them why it's so important that we work together and continue to care for each other and build community. And that's how we win this next election. Because we can't do it as a 42% Democrat population in Montana by ourselves. We need those 100,000 voters in District 1 who chose not to vote last session to feel empowered to vote next session. And it takes people like you telling stories to get them there. So thank you guys. I'm excited to meet you. Appreciate you being here.
Yeah.